You don't expect a threat to come on nice stationery. You picture it as a knock at the door, a smashed window, a shadow at the edge of the yard. Not a white envelope in the mailbox, addressed in neat, old-fashioned letters too. The new owner. Imagine this is you. You've just bought your dream house on a tree-lined street in a quiet New Jersey suburb. Century-old, big porch, the kind of place with enough bedrooms for the kids you already have and the ones you might, someday, think about. You're tired. Excited. A little overwhelmed by the cost. You stop on the way out one evening, flip open the mailbox, and find that envelope. No return address. Inside is a typed letter, saying the house has been watched for generations. That now it's your turn to live in it, and the writer's turn to watch you. It mentions your children, though you haven't even moved them in yet. It comments on the contractors going in and out. It says they're waiting to see what you do to their house. This isn't a welcome to the neighborhood. It's a warning. You're listening to Fear Files, Real Cases. Dark Details. Tonight, we're on a quiet street in Westfield, New Jersey, looking at a big old house with a big front porch and a small problem. Someone out there says they're watching it. And they won't stop writing. Westfield, New Jersey, isn't the setting you expect for an urban legend. It's not a crumbling mansion in the woods, not a remote farmhouse miles from help. It's an affluent commuter town, about 25 miles from New York City, with good schools, historic homes, and the kind of downtown where people pick up coffee and talk about property taxes and soccer schedules. In June 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus buy one of those houses, 657 Boulevard, a large, 6-bedroom home built in 1905. The price is around $1.3 million. It's a stretch for them, but it's a dream, room for their 3 young kids, closer to Maria's hometown, a place they imagine staying for decades. They start renovations before moving in. Contractors come and go. They're painting, refinishing floors, updating the kitchen, trying to bring the place into the 21st century while keeping its bones. 3 days after closing, Derek stops by the house alone one night to check on the work. On his way out, he checks the mail. The first letter is odd from the very beginning. It isn't addressed to Derek by name. It's addressed to the new owner. Inside, the tone starts out almost friendly, welcoming them to 657 Boulevard, talking about how long the house has stood, how it has been the subject of the writer's family for generations. Then it veers into something else. The writer claims that their grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and their father in the 1960s. Now it's their turn. They ask if the new owners know the history of the house. They say they can see the renovations, hear the workers' hammers, and wonder what the Broadduses are doing to the house. It's not just the house they mention. The letter refers to the couple's children, without using their names, but with enough detail to prove the writer has seen them. It calls them young blood, and asks whether there are more children on the way. It comments on where they might sleep and play and says, in essence, now that you've brought them here, I will be watching them too. Derek finishes the letter and does what most people would do. He heads straight back to his family and the police. At the Westfield Police Department, an officer reads the letter and is concerned enough to open an investigation. He tells the Broadduses not to tell anyone about the note, not their new neighbors, not friends, because at this point, almost anyone on the block could be the writer. The previous owners of 657 Boulevard, the Woods family, are contacted. That's when another detail clicks into place. They got a letter too. Not as long, not as threatening, but strange enough that they remember it. A note from someone calling themselves the Watcher, claiming to have watched the house, asking why it had sat empty. They received it just before closing and, assuming it was a bizarre one-off, they tossed it out. They never showed it to the Broadduses before the sale. Now, it doesn't feel like a one-off. It feels like the second act of a story that started years earlier. Weeks go by. Renovations continue. The family debates whether they're overreacting. Then another letter arrives. This time, the envelope is addressed to the Broadduses by name. Inside, the writer references details that were never public, the make of their minivan, the workers they've hired, and updates to specific rooms. They mention the kids again, noting where they've seen them playing in the yard, what they've heard them call to one another. The tone is more mocking now. The writer demands to know if the house has given them what they were supposed to, refers to the home as if it's a living thing that needs to be fed, and hints darkly at what might happen if they don't obey. The letters talk about secrets in the walls, about watching the house for decades, about waiting for the second coming of something the writer never fully explains. By this point, the Broadduses are scared enough that they stop bringing their children to the property. They never officially move in. They're paying a mortgage and renovation costs on an empty house, a house they now associate less with family dinners and more with a stranger peering through the windows. Police look for obvious suspects. One name keeps coming up, a family next door, the Langfords, who have lived on the block for decades. One of the adult children, Michael, has been described as socially awkward. His family home has a perfect line of sight to parts of the Broaddus property. Detectives interview him, but nothing concrete ties him to the letters. He denies any involvement. DNA on one of the envelopes suggests the writer might be a woman, but that doesn't narrow things as much as you'd think. Detectives ask neighbors to voluntarily give DNA samples. Some do. Some don't. There's no match. The Broadduses hire their own help, a private investigator to run background checks on neighbors, and a former FBI profiler to analyze the language in the letters. The profiler's take is chilling but not particularly actionable. The writer seems older, possibly highly literate, someone with a deep fixation on the house and a flair for dramatic, almost archaic language. It reads less like a teenager's prank and more like a manifesto. Or a love letter gone bad. In the meantime, the letters continue. One of them complains that the house hasn't been filled with young blood yet, taunting the family about leaving it empty. Another references their attempts to find the writer, sneering that they'll never succeed. The sense you get reading them is that the author is enjoying the fear they've created. The Broadduses are exhausted. They're also stuck. They own a house they're afraid to live in, and that, as they'll soon learn, might be almost impossible to sell. In February 2015, less than a year after buying 657 Boulevard, they put it on the market. They've remodeled, they've painted, they've tried to make the house as beautiful and welcoming as possible. No one wants it. Word about the letters has started to leak in the local real estate community. Even when would-be buyers make offers, they back out once they learn the full story. The Broadduses take a different approach. They file a lawsuit against the Woods family, arguing that the previous owners should have told them about the earlier letter. If you knew someone was writing these notes and had already targeted the house, they argue, shouldn't that be part of the disclosure? The lawsuit, once filed, does something the family never wanted. It makes the story public. Local media picks it up. Then state outlets. Then national. Reporters descend on Westfield. The house that once blended into a quiet, tree-lined street is suddenly a tourist destination, with cars slowing down out front and people pointing at the porch. Some neighbors are sympathetic. Others are furious. They worry about their property values. They don't like the implication that one of them might be a stalker. They don't like being asked for DNA. A few go further, floating an accusatory theory. What if the Broadduses made the whole thing up? From the outside, it's an easy narrative to spin. Couple buys house they can barely afford, decides they're in over their heads, and invents a stalker to get out of the deal or to land a movie contract later. The fact that the letters have never been made fully public, and that the writer has never been caught, feeds that suspicion. But there are problems with that theory too. For one thing, the Woods really did receive a letter before selling the house, something that doesn't fit cleanly with the idea of the Broadduses as the sole authors. For another, the family has lost hundreds of thousands of dollars on the property, between the sale price and renovations. If this was a hoax, it's a spectacularly bad one financially. Still, once suspicion starts, it's hard to call it back. In Westfield, the Watcher case becomes less of a ghost story and more of a mirror. Every theory says as much about the person telling it as it does about the evidence. Meanwhile, 657 Boulevard just sits there. Eventually, the town planning board rejects the family's attempt to sell the lot to a developer who would tear the house down and split it into two. The house survives. The letters stop, or at least stop being reported. The Broadduses find a compromise. They rent the house out. The tenants know about the letters. They move in anyway. Months go by. Then one day, a new letter arrives, addressed not to the new owner this time, but once again to the Broaddus family. The writer complains that the house has been filled with vile people and warns of possible accidents and misfortunes, suggesting, once again, that they feel a strange, almost mystical protectiveness toward the building. The tenants choose to stay. Nothing happens to them. At least, not that we know of. In July 2019, 5 years after buying it, the Broadduses finally sell 657 Boulevard to another family, Andrew and Allison Carr, for roughly $959,000, hundreds of thousands less than the purchase price and the money they've sunk into it. As far as public records show, the new owners have never received a Watcher letter. The Broadduses, for their part, move on physically, if not emotionally. They still live in Westfield, but not on Boulevard. They've tried, at times, to fade back into anonymity. Then Netflix adapts their story into a fictionalized limited series in 2022, and interest in the case spikes all over again. The identity of the Watcher? Still unknown. There's DNA, but no match. Suspicions, but no proof. A house, but no confession. Just letters and fear in a neighborhood that will probably never hear its own name without thinking of the mailbox at 657. So what do we do with a story like this? There's a temptation to treat it like entertainment, a spooky suburban tale with just enough open questions to fuel 100 Reddit threads and a series binge. But step away from the Netflix glow, and you're left with something more ordinary and more unsettling. This is, at its core, a story about home. About how quickly safe can turn into I don't want my kids sleeping here. About how one anonymous voice can make you doubt every passerby, every neighbor at the block party, every curtain that's half closed when you walk past. About how a house you love can start to feel like a stage, with someone you don't know sitting in the dark, convinced they're the audience and you're the show. It's also a reminder that real people live inside these headlines. The families on that block still have to walk their dogs, take out their trash, and send their kids to school while strangers drive past slowly to snap pictures of a porch they've seen on TV. If you're listening to this and you're into true crime and strange cases, like we are, there's one thing worth keeping in mind. Curiosity doesn't have to become intrusion. You don't need to knock on their doors. You don't need to leave your own letters. You don't need to turn someone else's home into your personal haunted attraction. You've been listening to Fear Files, Real Cases. Dark Details. Lock your doors. Be kind to the people who live next to you. And the next time you walk up to your own mailbox, remember, a house is more than just walls and windows. It's also the stories we let in.